Welcome to the Miscarriage Rebellion. I am Stacey June Lewis, lead of the Pink Elephant Support Network group counselling program Grief and Grace, and along with Pink Elephant's co-founder and CEO Sam Payne, through this podcast we will share the stories of many Australians who have lost their babies to early pregnancy loss. With evidence and empathy, we unpack the shame, blame and stigma and lack of support that they may face. This is a loss that has been silenced for far too long, and we deserve better. We are here to normalise the conversation and to make lasting change. Today we're talking about the heartbreaking reality of miscarriage care for women outside of major cities. We're joined by Claire Brett, Pink Elephant's Rural and Regional Ambassador, who shares her personal journey through 5 losses and the devastating lack of compassionate care. Claire unpacks the massive equitable access gap, where rural women face week-long waits, dangerous travel time for scans, and specialists who dismiss their pain. She calls for urgent changes, including the national rollout of ePass as mandatory mental health check-ins before hospital discharge.
Welcome to today's episode. Today we have a very special person indeed. We have Claire Brett with us on the Miscarriage Rebellion podcast. Claire, I have known for a number of years now through her dedication to supporting women who live in regional communities who go through the experience of miscarriage. Claire is Pink Elephant's Rural and Regional Ambassador and has done a number of amazing things for our community, from holding fundraisers to raising awareness to even speaking at Parliament for us in October last year. Goosebumps remembering how amazing you were at that. So welcome, Claire. If you could start by sharing a little bit with our listeners on where you come to the experience of early pregnancy loss and what's made you do the work that you do.
Yeah, so I, in between the birth of my first and second sons, I experienced my first miscarriage, and it turned out to be a miscarriage. But I, prior to that, had never heard of that term before. I always thought a miscarriage was the type you see in a movie where you know about it, and I went to a 8-week scanning appointment, and it was there that I discovered that my baby didn't have a heartbeat, and that I was in the early stages of having a miscarriage. After hearing that news, it was really devastating. I will always refer to it as the mind out of body experience, but also just that morning or even the weeks prior to that, having that internal dialogue with that baby with, when its due date might be, or boy or girl, or you picture it playing with your sibling or child already. And then that morning having that same conversation within yourself, and then by that afternoon it's silent. That was really devastating for me. And the shock of it all as well. I was early 30s and I was a bit embarrassed that I was female and didn't really know of any other type of miscarriages. I just felt really, really sad that that had happened to me. I went on to have a D&C a few weeks later, as my body didn't process that loss. And then we were advised that we could keep trying a month after that, which we did. And then I went on to have another 4 chemical pregnancies, which I had also never heard of before experiencing them.
So much there in that what you're not aware of.
I'm so sorry for those losses.
Yeah, so sorry for each of those losses, but there is a lot there in what you're not aware of, what you're not told, the lack of education on a woman's reproductive rights and her fertility and what it takes to make a baby and what can go right and what can also go wrong, how we can lose our babies. Yeah. And like you said, that language matters, right? Understanding the different types of miscarriage so you don't feel that sense of kind of almost shame that I'm not clever enough, I'm not knowledgeable enough about this and it's happening to me is definitely something we want to see changed, absolutely. And acknowledging again just how many losses you went through. There was a part of your story that I just want to unpack a little bit more there as well. So you said that you tried for what is sometimes referred to as an expectant miscarriage. And so for those of us listeners who might not know what that means, that is whereby a woman is given the option to go home and wait for her body to pass the baby herself. And then if that doesn't happen, you can have the option for a D&C. How was that framed for you as a woman who's in a regional community? Where did that conversation go? How did you land with that decision?
So I actually went and saw my GP after I got told that I had a miscarriage, and she referred me to the local specialist. He's now retired, and since then we still haven't had someone replace him, but that's a different conversation in a minute. But um, I was lucky enough to go and see him. It was I was urgently rushed, I suppose, into him because it had been also this 2-week period of finding no heartbeat, but my body wasn't processing it. That I was able to see him quickly. I let him know in that first meeting that my anxieties, because I did already prior have anxieties around death. My dad died when I was little. I said, if information isn't forthcoming or withheld, that's when I start to feel anxious that you're not telling me everything. In this first scan that I had, they did try to reassure me that maybe I had my dates wrong. So I was kind of always under the impression of, it could be this, it could be that, or it might not be. And it was always this miscommunication or not straight down the line information. And when I said this to him, his response was that most women overdramatize a lot of things, or we'll go home and we'll Google stuff and we'll think in our own heads the worst case scenario. So that's why he likes to just not say too much. And then I said again to him, but I've just told you that's not me, and you can't paint everyone with the same brush. My anxieties are the opposite. And he just said, it is what it is. I was told also before I went to see him, he's very blunt and to the point. But then I just think if you're in that position, why be in it then? If you're dealing with women, that's your job. He just said that because of my location, I live on a farm in Kentucky. My nearest hospital is about 45 minutes to an hour away. That if I did start bleeding over the weekend, to go to hospital, otherwise turn up Monday morning, take your husband if you want, and they'll just have the procedure. They'll just take you in and do the procedure. It was very non-human experience. It was, I'm a client, a patient, and this is just the doctor world of what you live in right now.
I'm so sorry, Claire. And I think it's really difficult when you advocate for yourself in ways where you communicate that there are particular needs that you have for very valid reasons. And then that is also denied in the face of you actually finding the energy to somehow even articulate what it is that you need. I wanted to ask you, in this experience, did you have a gauge um, that there was a particular way that this was being treated in comparison to what could be the way, or did you just kind of understand this was the way that people were? And when I say that in the context of your area, were you kind of thinking this can't be right, or did you just kind of accept that this was essentially what the treatment was, and you kind of had to just go with it?
He did explain well what my options were. He explained I could just wait until my body processed it, but who knows when that could be. I was actually at that stage mentally, I didn't want to cope with it anymore. I had spent the last 2 weeks waking up every morning wondering if today is the day I'm going to get rid of this pregnancy. I also had to still go to work during that time. Without them, I hadn't told my employer. So I had a 1-year-old child at the time, and I was at the stage where I actually wanted it to be over mentally. So he did explain the options to me, whether that was to wait. I could have taken the pill to process the pregnancy loss, but because my body hadn't started or wasn't processing it, and my location of my home address, that it might have been a bit dangerous if I had lost a lot of blood because my body was obviously not working properly. So he wanted me to make sure it was the proper procedure, which did make me feel safe that he was that way inclined. But he, was just very clinical with it all, and just very. I actually, once he told me what his theory was around women, I actually tried to really withhold my emotions, even though I wanted to cry. I wanted to say I'm so sad, like I wanted to explain why I had a croaky voice when speaking, but I didn't want him to then think I was a crazy person, or that I was dramatizing what was happening to me. So I actually remember, and I'm a crier all the time. So I actually remember, I don't know how, but I was able to just not cry in that appointment, purely because I didn't want him to think I was just crazy.
I think it's also really important to identify that tears aren't necessarily like they can be um, like when you say and state that generally you are a crier, and the fact that somehow miraculously you were able to withhold your tears, it suggests to me that there is a state of survival in that. That in fact, in order for me to get the care that I need, and in order for me to be heard by this person that is essentially going to help me in my time of need, I'm going to have to do what I need to do to be in line with the way he deems appropriate. And it is incredibly, incredibly dangerous when we start shutting off.
Medical misogyny at its finest.
And I think
it is an absolute example.
yeah. And I think in particular as well, what happens is we don't present in a fully kind of whole our whole experience isn't presented to the medical practitioner. That now we have the physical aspects that are being presented, and what that can do when we then start to look after our women that are going through this, completely minimize, but also not be able to even see the emotional and mental effects it's having, because now then it's not safe to show them. So then later on down the track, we wonder why so many women haven't dealt with their grief or don't feel safe to be able to grieve, because they literally weren't shown to be safe. Emotions weren't deemed as a safe aspect of this experience. So I'm so sorry that that happened, but I think it's important to point out that when we go through this experience, the physical element and aspect is one of them. That actually we're presenting as we are, as a fully fledged person with a mind and a heart and and physical manifestations of our loss. And it is in our right to receive care on all aspects of our health.
Definitely. I remember when I went in to make the appointment to see my GP, I remember telling myself, just prepare for when you walk in there that she's going to refer to space for travel, and traveling, and the time it takes to go anywhere. That's a disadvantage. When I had to have my scan, when I did fall pregnant with Jimmy, so I had, after those 5 losses, I fell pregnant again, and assuming I was going to miscarriage, that as well turned out to be Jimmy. And I remember my first scan I had to have to see if it was a viable pregnancy, for then to be heavily medicated after that. Um, my husband is self-employed, and he had to go off to work and meet me at the scanning, at the scan. So he went to work, and then I met him there at 10 o'clock or something. And in hindsight, I probably should have got someone to drive me, but I had an actual panic attack in the car driving to the scan. I had one the night before, so I probably should have known I wasn't okay. But again, I just think you put up, if you had these experiences prior and you try to tell yourself to be calm, to relax, you've had someone in your ear prior saying this is what women are like. So I tried to calm myself, but I actually have never experienced a panic attack before the night before or driving. But that is a major difference, as well as I have to drive 65 kilometres to my closest scanning appointment, crying. I couldn't breathe in the car, but that's my only way that I can get to these appointments. The same as if you were to miscarriage at home, and you do need to see medical help, you'll be in the car driving while experiencing that. So it was after my experience and after I had Jimmy that then I came across Pink Elephants and all of their work and support that they offer. And I wish one person in my whole interactions that I had, even with Jimmy, I experienced pregnancy after loss. Again, I never heard of that term before or what that meant or looked like. And even after having Jimmy, when I felt better, I still wasn't offered, if you don't feel better, here's a phone number, here's an organisation like Pink Elephants to call or get in contact with.
It's just not good enough. It astounds me that I still hear these stories. I know your story. I've known you for a number of years now, but I still hear stories from women that we support in our online communities that share experiences like this today. This is still happening. I guess as your role as a rural and regional ambassador, could you shine some light on some of the other things that you hear outside of your own experience from women in regional communities in terms of accessing care or support after an early pregnancy loss?
The main thing is really what I've just talked about, that there isn't that those touch points, easy touch points, that you don't have to repeat your story, that there's a I'm going to say the word wrong, continuality. What's that word? Of care.
Continuity.
Yeah, that's it. Of care, that you're not repeating the same story over and over again, that there is a simple and easy access to care if you need it, and it's not frowned upon and you're not thought of being crazy about it, where I feel women who live regionally and rural areas, we are somewhat thought of to be stronger than those in the metropolitan areas, because what we have to deal with drought, or at the moment we've got non-stop rain, with husbands who've got jobs that rely on the weather, and it's stressful, and we are strong in a way, but my emotional difference isn't a difference to those that live in the city. So I just see that there is a big gap between what we're offered here versus what's in the city.
Definitely doesn't feel like there's an equitable access to emotional support throughout the experience of early pregnancy loss. Yeah.
No. And then even little things like blood tests, getting into your doctor, the wait times. I don't know what it's like in the city, but here to see your doctor is a good 3 to 4 week wait. And blood results, particularly when I went through this, was 3 to 4 days before you'd hear any results because of how far they have to travel, Newcastle, Sydney area, to get back. And it's all done by car.
Yeah, and you take that theme, right, of I know myself, someone who lives in a metropolitan area, that when I was pregnant again after loss, one of the things that I did to reassure myself was to have a blood test every few days to check that the HCG was going up. And I would get the results the same day, if not the morning after. That was just what happened. So I would never think that then you're left in this turmoil for days on end, wondering whether your HCG is increasing. And that almost compounds the anxiety of pregnancy after loss, right? If that's something that you want and need to know for your safety, that's probably the wrong word, but you don't have access to that because of where you are. Another side of the things that I don't think is most people are aware of is, I know you touched on it slightly, that like the 65 kilometers to get to your sonography practice, but it is things like people we hear time and time again heartbreaking stories of women who do not want to be, in their words, a coffin for their baby, and they don't have an early pregnancy assessment service in their local hospital, which then means that they don't want to have an expectant miscarriage where they wait to miscarry at home. They don't want to take, to your words, either the MS2 or the medication because the risk of hemorrhaging and what access to your care is greater if you're in that kind of regional setting. So we hear of women literally driving for hours on end to reach a metropolitan hospital to access the option of an elective D&C. Basically, an elective is the wrong word, but what do you hear in your community from women like that?
I had a friend who had was experiencing or knew she was going to be having a miscarriage. The same with she had a scan, and it was actually on a Friday that she discovered this. And because of the time, she wasn't able to get that pill available to her, so she had to drive from Armidale to Tamworth. I think it's over 100 kilometres. Not it's maybe 100. I always say not far to Sam, but it is far apparently. In country terms, 100 and something kilometres isn't that far. um, but she had to drive from Armidale to Tamworth to be able to get that medication because it had already closed. The pharmacy had already closed in Armidale, and she had to go to a different pharmacy on hospital to receive that medication. So, yeah, there's stories like that. Tamworth Hospital at the moment have very shortage of midwives, so they're actually referring women to Newcastle, which is 400 and something kilometres away. So it's very it's scary. It's and it's sad too because you're dealing with a lot of things, obviously, when you go through something like this. The second you see those two lines on a pregnancy test, you're pregnant, and you imagine that baby and that child. So it's really hard to then go through a loss at any gestation and not receive the help that you should be getting.
I can imagine, Claire, too, off the back of that, then, we are also we also touch on pregnancy after loss and how incredibly unique and challenging those experiences can be. And so if the shortage is in the hospitals and in the system around early pregnancy loss, but then it then continues through midwifery care and other cares around women's health and actually, finding the right person to navigate the system with you to be able to have your baby. Did you notice that that was also something that you then had to face, that potentially the effects from your losses, and then when you eventually did fall pregnant, it kind of it continued with you?
Definitely. My anxieties and fear actually escalated once I had a confirmed pregnancy with Jimmy. I thought beforehand, once I knew he had a heartbeat and he was okay at that 6 week, I think it was, appointment. Prior to that, I thought, "Oh, once I get that done, I'll be fine." But I actually got really much worse in my feelings and how I thought about the pregnancy. Every day was a ticking time bomb for me, for when I was going to lose that pregnancy. I never convinced myself that I was ever going to really meet him until I could actually physically hold him. So, I cried a lot. I was really anxious. I was scared to go to the toilet in case I would see blood. I was scared to go anywhere or do anything in case I was further away from a hospital. Um, I also wasn't, I don't think, a great mum to Roscoe as well because I was so um, caught up in the emotions of being scared. Um, and I also was scared of how as I was scared of how bad I felt, that if something was to happen, I was scared of what was going to happen to me emotionally from that, and how I was gonna deal with that. I was actually really worried about my health, if something was going to happen. Luckily for me, I got to meet Jimmy, and he's still thriving and healthy and perfect baby. But as soon as I had him, those anxieties and fears instantly left, and I knew that. I knew once I got to meet him, I would be okay, and luckily for me, that was the case. But I also know that that's not the case for a lot of women. That it does extend into afterbirth. But yeah, I just I just panicked a lot. I was very you could tell me everything's okay, this scan's fine, he's growing, everything looks okay. But I just wasn't convinced because of those previous losses. And sometimes I thought, they were just, particularly those 4 after my miscarriage, were chemical pregnancies. Although I wasn't very far along when I had them, and really if I wasn't testing, I wouldn't have probably known I was pregnant. I probably would have thought I was just getting my period for that month. But I think that's where the miscommunication come from as well, with not feeling those losses and feeling I should dismiss those, because those smaller losses actually ignited that bigger feeling of loss. And I really had to digest that and make myself understand that although they were early, they still meant something to me, and which was why that I was.
Yeah, and I think that's where sometimes the conversation gets really missed as to, obviously when we lose our babies and our dreams kind of crush around us, that loss is standalone. Like that is going to always affect women in a certain way. But when that isn't held or acknowledged, and then the grief doesn't receive the mirroring we know, we have research to show supports the process from there, then I think it's underestimated just how impactful the rest of a woman's experience is, whether it's motherhood, whether it's life, whether, you don't actually ever end up falling pregnant and you continue moving through experiences that will be challenging or surprising or scary. When we have something so powerful that happens in us and it isn't mirrored, our grief isn't seen, our grief isn't acknowledged, it might seem like something small and a language adjustment, something very minor to healthcare professionals or environments that work in this space. But in fact, we see and know the power it has on how it affects women ongoing. And it really does showcase that, things like those environments that you're in, where it is 60 kilometers to get to a hospital, absolutely subconsciously would be contributing to that anguish and that fear and that concern. So these systems and these touch points that you spoke about that might feel small, to people where they don't see the effect, are actually long lasting and incredibly important, not just for the acknowledgement of the early pregnancy loss at the time, but women's mental health and well-being long term, I think, is the part that we really are not seeming to get in this conversation.
I think someone hearing that, say, in the political world, might say, well, you chose to live on a farm, or you chose to live in that rural area, which I did and I do. But I don't choose, when I do enter the hospital system, that I'm forgotten about, and that's what's happening. So it's not so much I do choose to drive this far every day to work, or I do choose to have my kids in a different town to where I'm living right now, this house. My children are a different town for school. I choose all of that. I don't choose to go to hospital and have no support.
You still pay tax and contribute exactly the same as what I do in a metropolitan area. I don't
That's what I was
see,
gonna
just
say.
like you contribute probably more in some ways in terms of being on a farm. But I just want to acknowledge there as well, because I feel like we kind of put a lot of words around that. But for me, what I'm hearing is this: you're not feeling safe. So where you are and when you need to access care, you don't feel safe that you can access what you need when you need in a timely manner, which then exacerbates the anxious feelings, which is perfectly understandable. So you're already anxious because this loss has happened before, and again and again and again. I finally fall pregnant again, and then I now have all these other factors that I have to deal with because of where I live. And so there just is an element of safety that's completely missing. I also relate to the pregnancy after loss. Again, Metropolitan, when I felt that anxiety, I went to my GP the same day. I got a referral to a psychologist. Within a week, I was in to a psychologist. I got medication. It all happened very quickly, and I got on top of it with my last pregnancy after loss. It doesn't sound like that's what's happening, because if you're in a regional area, then you've got to wait to see a GP. You might not get into your GP straight away. Then you have a wait. You've got that appointment. It's just this extended waiting times where you are being left at risk and nobody is checking in and giving you that support that you deserve. That's what I'm hearing. Would you say that's fair?
Definitely. And when I was in the hospital system for the DNC, I was told I would get a follow-up phone call. That never happened. And maybe in that phone call, then I would have said, what if I need help in a couple of months' time, or what if? And then they could have maybe helped me, but that phone call just never happened. And yeah, the GP wait is significant as well. When I'm the type of person where if I can't really get in, that day or that week, I'll probably just process it myself. Or obviously for me at that stage, I couldn't because my body wasn't processing it. But I know a lot of women who will just have a miscarriage at home and deal with it themselves because they don't want to rehash it in 3 weeks' time when you've almost gotten yourself through it, and then you have to go in and have that talk again. It's very obviously telling on your mental health in itself.
It's fascinating. It's so there's just so much that still needs to be done. Like it just does not feel anywhere near adequate still in the setting that you're in. And I guess with the theme of that and the theme of this podcast in terms of we want to shine a light on what's possible, what's needed, and within your own experience and that you get the privilege of hearing others now, what would you like to see changed for women that live in regional and rural settings who experience early pregnancy loss?
Two things. One is, I know I've heard of it, probably say it wrong, but is it EPAS or E something that
EPAS.
I'm not too familiar with? What is it?
Early Pregnancy Assessment Services. They're a division in a hospital that look after pregnancy complications in the first trimester.
Yeah. So again, that's something hospitals here don't have. And I don't understand why that's not a national thing. If it's in the public hospital system, then again, I pay my taxes. It should be in every single public hospital. So I would like to see that rolled out nationally, as well as obviously make sure that we're not missing out on that service. And I would really like more attention on the pregnancy after loss as well. I did, get that early on care with the miscarriages. But then I think once I fell pregnant, it was assumed that I was okay because I was pregnant in the medical world, that I wouldn't be affected by now being pregnant after so many losses. And I didn't have that same continual care, seeing the same person. It was a different midwife every time I went to the hospital. I think the experience after one miscarriage should be different. If you then fall pregnant afterwards, that your care from the start of that first scan until delivery is under a different program than what it would be as a regular woman going in who hasn't experienced a miscarriage, because I do think the care is different and it needs to be different because of the experience of what's happened to you prior. So they're the two main things that would be great to have here. And then simple things, which is, it's simple. Give me the care when I'm in your care. If I'm in the health system, I don't see why it's so hard to not hand me a flyer, a paper with information on it, like with Pink Elephant's details, to say if I need help, and that's not saying you might need it now, but in 6 months' time, when you're not falling pregnant again or you've had multiple recurrent miscarriages and you do need mental health help, here's a number to call, and to do it while I'm in your care. When I spoke to the hospital later in my role with Pink Elephants, I had a conversation with them around why it's not happening. When I do have a healthy baby, I can't leave without me being checked over physically, emotionally, and the baby also can't leave the hospital. And we have to all sign forms, me and the hospital, to say I'm okay to leave. So why is there a difference when I have a miscarriage that there's no one ticking off they've spoken to me to ask, are you mentally okay? They've given me Pink Elephant's details. That stuff's not happening. I just don't see the difference in not delivering my baby to delivering my baby in the help and support that I need or we need.
Well, you're the same woman. You're still the same person. We're all the same people. It's like it's not it's taking away the humanistic approach, because at the end of the day, there's one person coming in for different things, but that's the same person. So it is completely inhumane to not treat the person of the actual needs that the human is going through, right? So you're treating it on one front this way, and it's a bias. It's a misogynistic bias that desperately needs to be corrected. And Claire, you've made some wonderful points. Some of those things I think, would be useful across the board. But I'd love to imagine a world one day that even if they registered in the system that this patient had a miscarriage, that somehow it shoots off the information to us, and there is an opportunity for even there to be an automation check-in,
Yeah,
where
well,
it just doesn't feel like it's something that should be so difficult.
when so after I had Jimmy, I started to do my own research and support for women that lived here, and that was one of my things I came across was some stats or some data around how many women are presenting to local hospitals or GPs who have experienced a miscarriage, and there is none because it's not being recorded. So then how can our politicians or anyone in power help when it's not being recorded? And then we're still missing those people who aren't even going and experiencing this at home. But if we can at least record the ones that do enter the health system, that will go a long way into realizing that we don't have any support or services here. But also to be able to generate funding or to help ways, because we've got a number to work with. So that would be great too.
100%. How do you advocate for an e-pass in your area if you don't know the number of women that need access to that service? How do you provide the staffing levels if you don't know the numbers? And that's why Pink Elephants has obviously the Count Our Babies campaign. And there is hope there again. I want to acknowledge the work that the current government is doing in that space in terms of looking at the data. We're working with Australian Institute of Health and Welfare as a key stakeholder on how we can kind of capture better data and have a better understanding to inform the health system to have more services for women that have and partners that have this experience. So there is change happening, but again, I probably feel like a broken record here. It's slow. And then there's still these women today who need this now. And we have to keep that pressure on. We have to keep telling these stories and sharing these experiences to make sure that this change really does happen and that it's long lasting, that it's not something that's just, oh, we've solved that problem, off we go. We're going to go look at another women's health area now. There is so much work to be done here.
I think, Claire, as well, to your point, to receive support and care whilst in their care was something that I've taken away from this conversation, that, these systems are going to take a long while to change. And even though, we're all working so hard at that change, individually there are things that we can do if you work in the system, if you are a nurse, if you're a midwife, if you're a person that has experienced loss long enough ago that you feel like you might be able to step into an advocacy role, because these things, small shifts can happen in our power right now too. Because that statement of what goes on in your care, not after the fact or not later on down the track when someone feels better, is, I think, a really important piece of the puzzle. If I have to screen everybody in my private practice, if somebody looks like they're not doing so well, there is particular systems in order for me to keep my registration as a counsellor to ensure that their well-being is met. That's just I have to adhere to that. But somehow with this particular topic, there seems to be some grey areas, because as both of you have pointed out, if it's not noted, it's invisible. It can't be seen if it isn't acknowledged.
Well, when I went to the hospital and had this discussion with them, that was the point I made with them, was that they could see why I was in there. So then why does that not flag with their team that can help with emotional or mental health, that I need to be seen before I'm discharged. Someone from that department, social worker, needs to come up and either introduce themselves to me, say hello. I know you're here because you've experienced a loss. And I can say at the time, if that happened to me, I probably would have said, I'm okay, but thank you, I'll take it, whatever. But it was that 6 months later when I knew I was spiraling and I was not okay, that I would have been here at home in the comfort in my own home, ringing a number without the almost embarrassment or having to drag myself up the road to make an appointment, have a wait, go in there, explain it all to someone who's also not in this field. At least if I'm calling a number like Pink Elephants or someone, they already know when they're answering what it's going to be about. So if that had happened,
Yeah, the difference that would have made, right?
yeah.
Today's episode may have brought up some feelings that you need some extra support around, and that's totally okay. Head to pinkelephants.org.au to access our circle of support, your space where you can be met with empathy and support through all of your experiences of early pregnancy loss. We're here for you. You're not alone.